Hey guys, this message is brought to you by the NPDA. If you run a service shop or an accessory business in the powersports world, this one is for you. You probably think an event like Dealer Connect is not built for you, but here's the thing, it is. You are exactly who the National Powersports Dealer Association wants in the room this year. Dealer Connect is happening September 19th through the 21st in Columbus, Ohio. It's a 3-day event of real education, real networking, and real people who make this industry run. The kind of connections that turn a service shop into a full-line dealer down the road, and the kind of knowledge that helps you grow. And the NPDA built something special just for you, a dedicated registration with different benefits made for service and accessory dealers who are not yet members. To get in, you want to contact the email connect@npda.org. That's connect@npda.org. They'll verify your business, register you for Dealer Connect, and get you going. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dealership FIXit podcast. Today, we are going to get into something that every dealer needs to understand because it is coming and most of the industry doesn't seem really ready for it. We're talking about the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and specifically how you advertise your pricing and whether Powersports is the next in line for a crackdown that already has cost auto dealers tens of millions of dollars. So my guest today is exactly the right person to walk us through that. Her name is Ann Gambardella. She is the General Counsel and Executive Vice President at the Virginia Automobile Dealers Association. And she lives inside this stuff every single day, and she's going to help us break it down into plain English so that we can actually do something about it. So, Ann, welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And as a lawyer, I'll obviously start off with the disclaimer that everything we talk about today is not legal advice, and you should contact your own attorney about compliance. But we want to share some good information with you today.
100%. This is definitely not legal advice. This is two people talking about what's going on right now. So yeah, if you need any actual legal advice, make sure you contact your attorney. Okay, cool. So let's just kind of start with the lay of the land. There's been a lot of buzz. There's been a lot of news. A lot of dealers are kind of scared right now. When it comes to specifically the FTC and how dealers are advertising a price, automotive or power sports. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, ZDMS. ZDMS is built for dealerships ready to embrace change and unlock their full potential. Yep. As the industry evolves, outdated systems continue to hold dealers back with slow workflows, limited visibility, and operational inefficiencies. From multi-location management and streamlined workflows to real-time reporting and improved visibility across every department, ZDMS delivers a modern, scalable platform built to simplify operations, increase your efficiency, and support long-term dealership growth, allowing your team to spend less time managing software and more time driving results. Visit zdms.com, that's ZIIDMS.com today and schedule your demo. What is actually happening right now? And I want to make sure people understand that this is just not a new rule. This is something that was struck down with the CARS rule, but the enforcement is still there.
Yeah. So again, going back a little bit, you mentioned the CARS rule. That was a sort of comprehensive rule that the FTC pursued a couple of years ago through a lot of sort of legal machinations. That rule itself was not approved, was struck down. The NADA challenged that. The National Auto Dealers Association challenged that as not having been procedurally proper. But the FTC still has enforcement capabilities under its existing authority. So that's what it's doing now. It's sort of putting the CARS rule in place one dealer at a time, if you will. They can go take an enforcement action against anybody that's engaged in an unfair and deceptive practice. And what they did with these letters was identify what they're considering an unfair and deceptive practice. And that is to advertise prices that do not include all of the non-mandatory fee, well, any non-government fee, basically. So no matter what you're calling the fee, no matter where it's coming from, if it's freight from your manufacturer, if it's a processing, we call it processing fee in Virginia. A lot of folks call it a dock fee. Those fees all have to be included in the most prominent price in your ad. So if you look at a lot of car dealer ads right now, you're going to see an ad that sort of starts with MSRP because a lot of manufacturers require you to list that. I'm not sure whether that's the same for, all the power sports and motorcycle and all those dealers, but those are some manufacturer requirements. And then they may list, a dealer discount. They may list a rebate that's available to everybody. They may add in a processing fee. And then after they've sort of done that math, the number at the bottom that's supposed to be the most prominent, or at the top, however you want to do it, but the number that's the biggest, for lack of a better term, needs to be that sort of math total. MSRP minus something plus something, then what is the net, the total at the end? That needs to be the most prominent price in the ad.
It's so interesting because for about 20, 30 years, ever since kind of the internet came online with dealerships posting their inventory on there, it's always been the opposite. It's always been, as a dealer, let's list the lowest possible price that maybe only a few people qualify for, like a first responder rebate, or it's just a super low price so that they can get the click and the lead. And then, like you said, when they get in, the freight and the setup and the dock and all the other different fees that a dealer might charge, they tack it on when the customer is sitting there in the showroom. That has become the standard for most of the industry, power sports, marine, motorcycle, and automotive. What's really wrong with that? Are we really hurting people by doing that sort of practice? Is the FTC doing the right thing in that?
Well, I certainly, from our perspective, we've been encouraging dealers for years that those practices were already problematic under a lot of federal and state Unfair and Deceptive Practices Act rules. Now, the most prominent, having to add in your processing fee. There are lots of state laws, Virginia's included, that would allow dealers to separately state their processing fee and freight in a disclaimer at the bottom of an ad. So that
Right.
was allowed. We've been telling dealers for years, and the FTC has had a position for years that, and our regulating agency here in Virginia, the Motor Vehicle Dealer Board, which, by the way, these rules apply in Virginia to all motor vehicle dealers, whether you're motorcycle, anything that's under our franchise act is covered by these rules. They've already said that it was unfair and deceptive to list or to remove from the price any rebate that was not available to everyone. So that first responder rebate that you mentioned, it would have already been improper under Virginia law for a dealer to remove that and then list the price. You can
Yeah.
still list those possible rebates with some sort of, information about who may qualify, whether it's, rollover or click here or whatever. So you could list that there's 5 other rebates that might apply. You just couldn't remove them from the price. And that was existing law in Virginia and, quite frankly, a lot of other states. The FTC has had authority to go after those practices, and they have for a long time. The other thing that's sort of unique about just sort of where we are as in the consumer realm is this focus on fees is not just about car dealers. If you think about it, think about all the people that you see complaining about Airbnb fees and Live Nation fees and, who fill in the blank. It seems there's a company that advertises home cleaning at a really cheap introductory price. I've noticed they've added a disclaimer to their advertisements in my, TV market area. So I think it's just been a focus of certainly of consumer activity on the state level, but also the FTC. The idea being that the consumer ought to know what the price is before, and in the context of car dealerships, they've made statements that they're really focused on the customer not going to the dealership expecting to buy X vehicle at X price. Then they get there. Not only is that vehicle not there, but or it's more expensive. So they view that time that the consumer takes to go into a store as the harm that they're attempting to address. And that's really what they're getting at, is that the ad should be legitimate. The ad should include everything that it's going to cost the customer, and then the customer can decide whether they want to engage with that seller. And that's been the harm they've been looking to address. So some of these concepts, I know I've been doing webinars and articles and all sorts of presentations to dealers for years that talk about making sure your advertising is not deceptive and doesn't include those things that the average person can't qualify for. The example we always use in the car realm is you can't have a loyalty rebate and a first-time buyer rebate and take both of those out of the price, right? Presumably those two would be something that no person could qualify for. So that's been a focus for a long time. In some manner, we don't see this as a change. One of the things that our industry, particularly the VADA, leading the way, quite frankly, has said this is an opportunity for the industry to really lead the way in price transparency, and it creates a level playing field so that the dealers who, quote, want to do the right thing are not disadvantaged by the games other dealers might want to play that we all might agree we wish they wouldn't. And so that's sort of where we've been, with this recent pronouncement.
You bring up such a good point. Is certain dealers want to abide by these rules and follow the guidelines and be transparent towards the customer, but their competition 10 miles down the road that sells similar product or the same even product, they are not following those rules. And I think the fear right now that's kind of sweeping through at least the powersports industry, again, I'm not sure about automotive, is that those guys that are doing the right thing, those dealers, they'll get left out because they seemingly have a higher price versus the dealer down the street. Now, what happens when the customer gets to that dealer and they add on the fees, that's a different story. But the initial impression of I'm a customer looking for a vehicle, I've got option A and option B, I'm going to go with the lowest price one versus this dealer who's doing everything right and lists out all their fees. What would you say to those dealers who are a little scared to make that push for that simple fact?
Yeah, one of the things that NADA is working with the FTC, and then states like the Virginia Auto Dealers Association are working with our own state AG, is we want this enforced. We want to make sure if you're going to impose this rule, let's have some robust enforcement so that doesn't happen, so that the people who are doing it right are not disadvantaged. So I think you're going to see some robust enforcement, and quite frankly, it's not going to be that hard, because if 75% of the industry is advertising a car at X price and you got a couple people out there that are advertising it a lot lower, well, I know where I'd look if I were the FTC or the state AG, right? I mean, not too hard to identify those people who are probably being a little too cute by half with how they're trying to advertise their vehicles, unless they're, if the whole industry is selling at one price and somebody else is really cheaper, you got to ask yourself why. And that provides maybe a roadmap to some enforcement action on the part of either the FTC, which has its own ability to make your life difficult, but there's also really, really aggressive and active state AGs all around the country that are just looking to engage in this. I know a number of states have enacted state-based fee disclosure rules. That was one of our concerns, is that you end up with this patchwork, and dealers in different states are perhaps disadvantaged because the state across the border can do something different. I know there's about half of the states now have rules that say that dealers have to include, for instance, their dock fee in their advertised price. So it was happening in dribs and drabs, either by individual enforcement actions or by state activity, be it legislation or enforcement action by state AGs. So this is really just the federal government saying, okay, let's all play by the same rules. And there is some value to the industry to have it as one standard that can be enforced, so that, again, those dealers that are doing the right thing are not disadvantaged.
Let's talk about that enforcement a little bit, because there's some rumors and seeing some articles and some headlines, but the big federal rule's gone. As you say, the states and their AGs and the FTC, they're starting to enforce that. The FTC has sent warning letters to about 97 dealer groups in the spring. What did those letters actually say? And should a dealer who didn't get one feel safe, even if they're not practicing this rule?
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone should take the absence of a letter as a get out of jail free card. Those letters identified several things that the FTC is going to consider, like I said, unfair and deceptive practices under their existing statutory authority to enforce, not with a special rule. So it was a big focus on advertising, not including any mandatory fees, not including any mandatory add-ons to a product. Also, not having the vehicles in stock. There's been a discussion about that in our industry. Manufacturers often send vehicles that have been allocated to a dealer, but that are in transit or still being built. So, but then they also addressed adding products to vehicles. That's the next shoe to drop. Is really going to be. They have this view that some of the we call them vehicle protection products in our industry,
Right.
are that don't have any value to a customer. I don't know what that means, but that they view some of those with a very jaundiced eye. And so if you advertise the price, you do the rebates right, you include your doc fee, but then, oh, by the way, when you get into the F&I office, you have to buy this package because it's already on the car.
Right.
Well, yeah, you either got to be willing to put it on there for free if the customer doesn't want to pay for it, or not put it on until after the customer agrees to buy it. So it's a lot of training involved in making sure that the dealership personnel are presenting things properly, and that the dealership understands that it's not just advertising and the rebates and the processing fee or the doc fee. It's also, what are you doing in your F&I office? Have you added something to the car and you're now telling somebody, oh, you've got to buy this now because it's already on the car? No, you can't do that. I mean, our argument is you probably shouldn't have been doing that to start with. But certainly now you're going to find yourself in a problem area. So it's not just the advertising that folks need to really look at. It's dealership practices in general. And like I said, this is nothing new. From my perspective, we've been telling dealers this for any number of years. The National Auto Dealers for car dealers has a policy about presenting vehicle protection products to make sure you're doing it fairly and that they're voluntary and the customers agreeing to them. So we've been preaching from this hymnal for quite some time now. So I would say that all dealers need to pay attention, not just car dealers and not just the 97 who got those letters, because the FTC is clearly focusing on this whole sort of fee issue in this industry and others, as we mentioned before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, I think in the car world they call it an addendum. So you would have on a new car, anyways, a Monroney sticker that displays the MSRP, and then something usually dealer printed on the windshield that says nitrogen tires and ceramic coating and desert protection package and the security theft alarm. And yeah, they would have to try to get that out of you.
Yeah, you're gonna have to put all of that in your advertised price, or can't make the customer pay for it.
Yep.
It has to be truly, a voluntary purchase by the customer. And again, that takes training to document that properly in the F&I office. There's nothing wrong with selling those products. But you got to make sure that you're documenting that the customer voluntarily agreed to it, and that, your advertised price was X. This was agreed to afterwards, or your advertised price included those products. And so the customer knew what they were buying when they saw the advertisement and came in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in power sports and motorcycle, it's fairly common to have a few vehicles, a motorcycle or an off-road ATV or a side-by-side that are accessorized. They might have a windshield on the side-by-side, or wheels and tires, or this motorcycle, this Harley gets an exhaust kit. But typically those aren't included in the online price. It says plus parts and accessories and install, but you're saying that all has to be included in that one prominent price as well as everything else.
Absolutely. And I would argue that, quite frankly, those under Virginia law, that should have already been disclosed that way. There are specific advertising rules for motor vehicles under Virginia law, but motor vehicles under Virginia law for that advertising definitely includes motorcycles, trailers, some other identified items in RVs, those sorts of things. So all of the Virginia advertising rules have long applied to those other vehicles that you wouldn't necessarily think of as a motor vehicle, but by definition in Virginia code they are.
Yeah.
So I would say that adding those things to the Harley and not disclosing them even now under Virginia law is problematic.
Yep. Yep.
So, and this is just so some of this is not as big of a change as legally is not as big of a change as it appears. In practice, it may be quite a bit of a change. Because I think there's a lot of I know there's a motorcycle dealer on the dealer board, and he's been very vocal about making sure that motorcycle dealers understand that they're under these same advertising rules in at least in Virginia. So and that there's sort of a misconception maybe that they didn't apply things like processing fee and freight and all those items. So again, some of these things would have been problematic beforehand. The FTC's just sort of memorialized them in those letters.
Yeah. And let's talk about that enforcement just a little bit more. If it's not the FTC or it's the state attorney general that is pursuing these dealerships who are presenting these unfair online advertising practices, there's a rumor floating out there that the FTC is encouraging dealers to tell on their other dealers who they see that they're competitive with to, I guess, rat them out, to say it plainly. What is that all about? And can you tell us a little bit more about how that's done or how dealers are doing it?
Yeah, there is a way on the FTC website to report any violations. Now, I don't know how, if there's tens of thousands of them reported, and you can certainly report them to your state licensing agency as well. It's goes back to my comments about how we've on a state level, and then certainly the NADA on a national level is asking for enforcement on this, saying, look, you need to make sure that, dealers are playing by the rules, because if not, you're hurting the part of the industry that's trying to comply. So it is an important, for lack of a better description, it is an important part of this is the enforcement. And without knowing where the violations are, the FTC and the state, regulatory agencies can't always find those. So yes, there is a way for dealers to do that. I know that there have been some that have asked us about how to do it, and we point them to the website and say, here's how you can make that happen. So it's it's the industry policing itself, and there's something something worthwhile about that on a certain level.
Yeah, I think personally you can look at it both ways. I don't think a lot of these dealership owners and operators want to see their fellow dealership owners and operators in any sort of trouble or get fined. I think it's supportive for most dealers that are competitive even with each other, but still there has to be a line that needs to be crossed and says, hey, you know what, I'm doing all of this stuff. We're preparing our advertising to be compliant, but this dealer hasn't. And it's been a year, it's been a year and a half, 2 years. I'm losing deals potentially to this dealer because they're not including all these fees in their pricing. They're getting opportunities I'm not getting. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword there that it needs to happen. But I just thought that was interesting. Okay.
Well, and there's nothing to say that dealer can't pick up the phone and call their fellow dealer and say, hey, did you know that you're supposed to do this? Point them to your, in our case, we have a whole page on our web page, a separate place where we've put all of this information. They can send them to the VADA website. They can call me, and I can pick up the phone and call the dealer and say, hey, are you aware of this? What's going on? So there's lots of informal ways to do it as well. But I think that the industry working together is going to be the best solution to really being a leader in this consumer realm, where you see so many different areas where these fees are just really getting stuck in consumers' craws. I mean, they really are. There's nothing that'll light up a Reddit board or something more than an unfair fee that was tacked on at the end. People hate that stuff, and at the end of the day, the industry will be better for the transparency and the consumer confidence that'll come with it.
Yep. Let's talk about Powersports specifically. So up until this point, the FTC and the state AGs and the letters and the fines and everything that's been happening is auto dealers. Do you actually think that power sports and motorcycle and marine dealers, for that matter, are next? Are they in the crosshairs? Because when we were talking to Gene Silas, he predicted that 100% within the next 12 months, they're coming for y'all. And I just wanted to get your feedback specifically on those types of dealerships.
I think there's certainly, it's easier to start with car dealers because you've got the sort of emotional tug that everybody, they need the car to go to work. They got to drive their kids to soccer. You may not need the boat or the motorcycle in quite the same way, but the bigger a target that an industry makes itself, the easier it is for the FTC to come in. So if you've got, all of these come from consumer complaints. I mean, make no mistake about it. And the FTC has made it relatively easy for consumers to complain. So these come from consumers contacting the FTC saying, I went in to buy this motorcycle, it's advertised for $20,000. When I got there, it was $35,000. And there's stories out there like that, and they're
Of
not good.
course.
And that's going to invite some scrutiny. So I don't know why any industry would think of themselves as exempt. I don't have any firsthand knowledge that they're actually targeting any other particular industry, but there's certainly a lot of similarities with the work they're doing in the auto dealer industry to think that it would be logical that they would hit these other folks.
Yeah, anybody taking 10 minutes to go review multiple dealers' Google reviews would see that some of them are not so honest. And let's just kind of go over a couple numbers here. Since you're talking about the consumers, on the trust side, this is a poll that was done. 86% of buyers worry about hidden fees, 76% do not trust dealer pricing, and 30% agreed to a price, then found hidden fees at the signing, and 29% of buyers walked into a different dealer over pricing doubt. So when we talk about consumers, I mean, they are driving this forward. They do want this transparency, and they want an easier and more trustful buying experience in automotive or power sports, anyway. So, I mean, it just makes sense. Let's talk about the OEM problem, the manufacturers that are providing this inventory to the dealers. We're talking about Kawasaki and Harley and Honda and all the major ones. Freight and setup fees are two that are specific that a dealer typically charge on a deal. Maybe they're included in the advertised price, maybe they're not, but freight and setup are a sore spot in power sports because the manufacturer sets it up that way that the dealer has to basically eat that cost, or they have to get some type of reimbursement. How should dealers handle fees they didn't create but are still having to collect some way?
Yeah, I mean, any fee that is charged, and car dealers have the same thing. They tend to break out freight on those Monronis. And for a long time, Virginia law let the dealers separately disclose that freight. Now it has to be in that price. Now, I'm assuming that these are fees that the dealer knows up front. They're not charged back to the dealer later on after the sale or that sort of thing, in which case I would certainly suggest the industry get to the FTC and say, hey, look, this is a problem we're having. We're doing that now. We're still waiting for some frequently asked questions to be issued by the FTC based on a webinar and some questions that the NADA actually put to them. So we're waiting for some additional clarity on some really, sort of unique questions we had about the industry that the regulators tend not to know. But if they're fees that the dealer knows and they want to pass them on to the customer, they're going to have to put them in the price. That's just sort of the way it is. And if everybody does it, it shouldn't have an impact.
Yeah.
But that goes back to the enforcement. But again, doesn't matter what the fee is. There's freight on the manufacturer side for dealers. There's any number of rebates. And in fact, there's lots of rebates that the manufacturers make it really difficult on the car side. For instance, you could have a financing rebate that's available in certain zip codes. Well, people buy, you can't just say, well, I'm in that zip code, I can advertise it. If the customer comes from, 4 counties away, it may not apply to them.
Yeah.
So it's gotten really hard to sort of navigate all the different offers that the auto manufacturers are putting out there rebate wise, and anything that the majority of, or I would say all customers can't get, just can't be taken out of the price anymore. You can list it. And the customer can say, yeah, you say it's $25,000, but I can also get, 500 here and 1,000 here. And so I know what my price is coming in, but you can't take it out of the price in what you're advertising.
You bring up a good point, because there's typically two main ways that a consumer would buy one of these products. They would either A, pay cash, and that includes all the fees and plus the state tax and registration. But the other way would be financing. And a lot of us would argue that probably 70% of all the vehicles bought are through a loan. And I read it on here that some rebates or discounts not available to everyone, like you said, but hiding a required down payment, conditioning the advertised pricing by using dealer financing, the required add-ons and such. But when it comes to the financing side of it and potentially putting a discount out there if you finance, that's not available for everybody, I guess. I mean, that is also part of the deceptive practices that the FTC is looking at as well, aren't they?
Yes. And again, it's been noted that you can still list those. So you may go on go to a big car dealership in your area and look at how they're doing their ads. You can still list that there's a, GMAC finance, does GMAC even exist anymore? Or, dealer financing available for, there's $1,000 rebate if you finance. There's lots of times, though, that these manufacturers have an either or. You can take $500 off the price, or you can get this cheaper finance rate. So those get complicated. So the manufacturers truly have not been helpful to dealers in just sort of setting up this atmosphere of moving the needle a little bit more than we might all be comfortable with. And that's
Yeah.
just created a lot of confusion among dealers. So they're, our dealers are trying to sort all this out, much less all of the third party sites that, grab this dealer information, and making sure your prices are the same across your entire advertising platform. And that can include, the other thing we have always pointed out to dealers, that can include your social media. So it's a good time to make sure your staff understands that if they post something on social media, that could be an advertisement for the dealership that the dealership could be responsible for. And the average salesperson doesn't think of that. They think, hey, we just got this great new blah, blah, blah in. Its price is X. Well, congratulations. You may have just walked into a advertising problem. We've always cautioned dealers to make sure that you're driving everything back to your own website. One, you can control that the advertisement is right, and two, you can make sure the customer's coming through your dealership CRM versus the salesperson's private list of customers, or whatever they may be trying to gain for themselves. But yes, sort of out there looking at all advertising that the dealership is doing, whether it's on third-party sites that they push stuff to, third-party sites that their manufacturers provide information to. The manufacturers push down a lot of prices and inventory, at least on the car side, to the dealership's website, making sure that's correct.
Yep.
You've got to, or that is compliant rather. So there's just lots of things for dealers to look at. It's a lot more complicated than it sounds. Oh, just include everything on your price. Well, okay, if I change the price in used cars, they might change the price daily. It's got to then be pushed to all the different websites. So the FTC has indicated some acceptance of the fact that it might not be instantaneous across all those websites, but the dealer really needs to document how they manage those advertising changes and show that they are doing everything they can to make sure that it's happening as quickly as possible. So again, lots of documentation, lots of training of your staff, and just taking a very comprehensive view of your advertising and your practices. And just it's a good time to just review all those and make sure you're dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's.
That's such a good point. You brought up two of them that I want to touch on real quick. So let's get back to these third-party sites. I've seen something about car gurus declining to list dealer car inventory if they are uncompliant with some of the fees and the structure of pricing that's in there. Other sites have kind of taken the same stance. They don't want to be held responsible. But what is the responsibility of these third-party places that a dealer technologically sends their inventory feed. They do all the pricing over here on their website, and then it feeds over to this other website. I mean, there are delays, as you said. There's maybe a glitch or someone fat fingers the wrong price when it goes over there. I mean, what is the responsibility of the third party places that you pay a subscription fee for every month to list your inventory?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're concerned about being dragged into any of these situations. I, on the flip side, heard from a dealer that had a third-party site that um, sent them sort of an opt-in. Do you want to comply with the FTC? I'm like, what? I mean, who in your dealership is getting that document and who's checking? No, put our prices on there however we want. But so there's again lots of confusion out there on those third-party sites because quite frankly, if a dealer can document that they've tried to get the third party site to comply the way they're supposed to, and the third party site just doesn't, I don't know, the FTC could go against that site. I mean, they're putting out deceptive advertising after being warned and begged and whatever else the dealer's doing to try to get it right. But again, I think even the FTC in some of these enforcement actions, and we know some of the counsel that have handled some of these actions, so we know sort of the inside baseball and what the FTC is actually saying in its filings and its settlement negotiations, that they recognize that it's not just you press a button and magically it changes everywhere. But if it's a week, if it's 2 weeks, yeah, they're not going to accept that. They're not going to accept it, but it's going to go a lot better for the dealer if they document their process to say, when we change a price, these are the 10 steps we take, or however, 3 steps, 25 steps, whatever it takes to make sure that we're sending this through. And a lot of that's done, through software on the dealership level. A lot of folks, it's all coming through VADA or something like that, so that
Right.
it should be getting changed everywhere. It's just not all real time. And I think even the FTC recognizes that there may be a bit of a lag, but the length of that lag and a dealer doing nothing to monitor that lag is not going to go well for the dealer.
Hey guys, this message is brought to you by the NPDA. Here's one worth putting on your calendar. Dealer Connect 2026, the National Powersports Dealer Association's biggest event, September 19th through the 21st in Columbus, Ohio. I'll be there. It's going to be 3 days of practical education, straight talk, and the best networking in the business. Solutions for your store, your team, and your dealership future. Whatever kind of dealer you are, there's a place for you in that room. Register now at npda.org. That's npda.org. And if you run a service or accessory shop, make sure to email connect@npda.org about a special registration just built for you. Dealer Connect 2026, Columbus, be there. On the flip side of it, with the dealers who will or will not price their vehicles accordingly with the guidelines, there's even some that have opted into not price it at all. They'll put up some type of tag that says click for quote or call for quote. What is the FTC stance on dealers who just remove all the pricing and say you got to call us if you want a price?
I don't know that we have a definite answer from the FTC on that issue. I think that I don't know that there's an absolute problem with doing it that way because you're not being deceptive. But I think that if they see that as a way to get around, but then it becomes a training issue, right? So the person calls, what are they told? You're still going to have to disclose that price at some point. And if it's used as a ruse to quote them a really low price and then they get in and say, oh, well, nobody told you that. Well, okay. That can still be an unfair and deceptive practice. So I think it's not a cure-all by any stretch of the imagination. You're still going to have to tell that customer what the price is. And I don't know, I'm not a consumer psychologist, but if I'm looking at 3 websites and 2 of them tell me a price and the other one says call me, I'm going to think that other person's price is a whole lot higher, or they put it out there. So I don't know if that weighs into it all, but I don't know that that's a sort of a cure for this circumstance, particularly when you've got a large inventory. It just, practically speaking, I don't think that's going to be a strategy that helps. And it certainly isn't going to necessarily eliminate all scrutiny from the FTC, because they're then going to be calling you and asking what the price is, and maybe they'll come in and see if it's the same price. That's been known to happen, and those same complaints are going to come out saying they quoted me this price on the phone, and They told me that, that person doesn't work here anymore, or some craziness when you get in there. So,
Well, you bring up such a good point because I didn't even think about that, but that's kind of where I was going is let's say that most of the industry or most of the vehicles on these three sites, they all say that, and I am forced to call. Are you kind of saying that the verbal communication through the phone call or an email or a text, it is still falling under these deceptive practices? If a salesperson tells me it's $12,000 and then I get in there and it's $15,000, I wasn't expecting that extra $3,000 in fees, that still falls under this?
yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be an advertising problem. It could still be a deceptive practice problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Your generally communications, one-on-one communications are not defined as advertising in a lot of state and federal code,
right.
but lying to somebody on the phone, I mean, that's deceptive. If you never had an intention of selling at that price, I think the FTC is going to still make an argument that's an unfair and deceptive practice. It's just not
Oh,
an advertising unfair and deceptive practice.
right. And that's really where I want to be clear is we're talking about advertising something that the entire world can see on a website versus I'm making a one-to-one phone call to the dealership and the guy tells me one thing, I get there and it's another. It still kind of falls in, but it's maybe still a little bit of a gray zone is what I'm hearing.
Well, but I mean, I think that it's a violation, but just a different kind of violation. It's still unfair and deceptive. It's just not an advertisement. Same way as adding product after the fact could also be, or adding product that the FTC deems as, for instance, selling gap to somebody when there's no gap in their loan.
Right.
Those sorts of things, that can be an unfair and deceptive practice, even if it's not an advertising unfair and deceptive practice. So there's lots of things that you can do that can be actionable without being an advertisement is I guess my point. So just be
Yeah.
aware of all that. It goes back to this training. You got to really train all throughout. They view, you know, adding product in a deceptive way on a vehicle purchase can be an unfair practice, not necessarily an advertising violation, just to be an unfair practice. So
Yeah, morally, it's terrible if you lie to a
well, right,
customer.
exactly,
But the potential legal ramifications that a dealer could get in trouble for if they're telling them one thing, oh, it's 12,999 plus fees, and they get there, it's total out the door $15,000. It still doesn't line up with what the FTC is shooting for in some of these enforcements, right?
Correct.
Okay, so thank you again for your time. Just a couple more questions, right? I always
Sure.
kind of like to end these things with like, okay, what's next? What do we need to do? Obviously, this conversation has been about adding your dealer fixed costs of a vehicle, including your dock fee, into the price, the prominent price, nonetheless, of the vehicle that anyone can come off the street and buy. They don't have to qualify for some special rebate or something. So if they wanted to do this today or this week and they go through their website or their inventory tool and they go, you know what, I'm going to go forward with this. What are the first 3 moves that they need to do this?
I mean, I think just making sure that making sure that whoever's doing their website understands this and lists everything properly, because a lot of this information is flowing from the dealer's own website into other third parties. Making sure you understand what your third party sites are listing and how they're doing that. We've had that issue over the years that it might, a third party site might just pull a price, but when you separately state the processing fee, it doesn't show up. Now you have to include the processing fee in the price so you don't have that problem, but you want to make sure they're pulling the most prominent price if you're listing sort of that math stack, if you will. But I think those are the 2 most important things, is just getting your arms around all the advertising that's out there and understanding what each of those vendors is doing and how they're doing it. That in and of itself is a pretty big bite to take off to start. But yeah, that would be just going back in and making sure that you understand that the only thing that you're leaving out are basically, tags, title, and registration.
From the state.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. You don't
So
know what those are based on each customer.
Yep. The state fees are a separate add-on
Right.
when at the
Government
time
fees,
of
for lack
purchase.
of a better term. Yeah.
Government fees. Thank you. Okay.
Mhm.
So for a dealer who is worried about this killing some of their margin, and I say this because it's very prominent in the power sports industry that, again, they will rely on these feeds, on these additional freight and setup and whatever type of fees to kind of get back into the green, into the black on their profitability for this deal. I mean, what would you say to the dealers who are worried about that and they're giving everything away because they're still trying to be competitive, yet show the lowest price, including the fees?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the cost of an FTC investigation, how many vehicles are you going to have to sell to pay the millions of dollars it could end up costing you? It's going to be sort of bumpy as we get to sort of full compliance, if you will, in our industry and in the power sports industry. It's not going to be perfect. I just not making yourself a target in the long term is going to pay off. I can't sitting here comfortably at my desk, not having to, run the business in the store, where the rubber hits the road. No pun intended. I get it. It's easy for me to say sitting here at my desk. I just think that long term, the dealers that comply are going to find themselves in a much better position.
Absolutely. And from what I'm hearing, the standard penalty is north of $50,000 per violation. Is that about right?
That's certainly in the statute, whether and how they get to that point. But you also got to, two things that most people don't think about. There can be state enforcement. If you're a franchise dealer and you lose, they suspend your license for a certain number of days, you can lose your franchise.
Yep.
And what about your reputation? The reputational hit is pretty huge too, because it's going to be splashed all over local media. That doesn't help. So there's a lot of intangibles that go with that as well. There's not going to, the penalties that the FTC announces, they always like to go on the high end because they like to, beat their chest a bit. And it doesn't ever turn out to be that in practicality, but how much is too much? I mean, the downside is pretty significant, and the reputational damage alone is enough to sink organizations. It just can.
Yeah, I mean, you can use this switching and thinking of how you advertise in your vehicles as a competitive edge, being the transparent type of competitive edge. I mean, it's not a loss in the long run. As you say, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, more buyers are walking away from certain dealers over the doubt in price, or they're having to argue and pry a total out the door price even before they're coming in. This is just an easier path that the dealer can present out there to the customer base and say, hey, this is what it is, plus tax, registration, and state license. So for sure. All right. Where can dealers go? I know you're in Virginia and you're going to tell me the VADA site is probably the best resource, but where can other dealers in other states go to get in more information about the rules or how to do this, or just some general help?
Yeah, your state associations are always a great place to go. I don't know how the power sports associations are across the country, but I know they are active. Your national association, and then your state regulatory body may have some information available to you about what the state advertising rules are if they are different, or your state AG may. I'm not saying you need to call and say, "Hey, I think I'm breaking the rules." What are they? But that may be a source of just some information. The information on the VADA's website is not behind any sort of paywall or password protected, so anybody's welcome to go on there and just search FTC, and you sort of find our all of the information we've put out. It's a little car centric, but it may help. So, but there's lots of resources out there, lots of people writing about it, lots of law firms out there that represent dealers that are putting stuff out. So it's not necessarily hard to find. It's just maybe a little hard to implement.
Yeah.
Take a hard swallow and let's all do what we got to do. And, hopefully a year from now, we'll all be like, it's turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, you said it best. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And I think that's what we're going through right at this moment in time. And the dealers who proactively take this next step into this next era of retail online, at least for the industry in power sports that's already kind of going on in automotive, I think it could be a good thing. And it's just going to help with more customer trust, buying more vehicles, and improving the industry overall. So, and this is exactly why I wanted to bring you on today. Thank you so much for making sense of this to me and the people listening. I think it's the kind of thing that dealers worry about until it's a problem. And this is just one way that we can help them get in front of it and try to be a little bit more, again, proactive. So thank you, Ann. How can people get a hold of you if they need to reach out?
Probably the easiest way is to just go on the VADA website. My contact information, email, phone number are all listed there rather than me trying to spell my last name for my email address here. VADA.com is a whole lot easier than Gambardella. So I'm easily found on that website, and just feel free to reach out if we can be of any help.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much again. And if anybody's listening that has gotten some takeaways from this, it's very simple. Get ahead of it now before the FTC turns our way, and the dealers who fix their pricing on their own are going to be in a much better spot than the ones who wait for that fine or that letter. So on that note, we'll say thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by ZDMS. Okay, guys, physical inventory. Most dealers do it once a year. Some avoid it altogether. And honestly, who can blame them? Closing the store for days, paying staff to count parts, and still ending up with inaccurate data, it's a painful process that costs time and money. ZDMS changes that. With RFID physical inventory, 1 or 2 employees can complete a full store count in a single evening. No closing, no disruption. Just pull the trigger on a handheld scanner and walk the floor. No line of sight required, no climbing shelves, no bending under counters, just fast, accurate counts feeding directly into your ZDMS system. And because it runs inside ZDMS's perpetual inventory system, your data is always current. That means better analytics, less obsolescence, and fewer lost sales. This is the technology Powersports dealers needed. And ZDMS is the only DMS in the industry to build it. Talk to your ZDMS rep today, or to learn more, visit zdms.com/fixit.